Hello, everyone, and welcome to Outspoken. I'm Regina Davis Moss, President and CEO of In Our Own Voice, National Black Women's Reproductive Justice Agenda. And today, we're talking about Black August and the work of liberation. Now, every August, Black August calls us to remember, but it doesn't call us to remember simply for the sake of looking backwards. It calls us to study, to reflect, to understand that struggles that came before us, and then also to ask ourselves, what does the history require of us now? Because liberation has never been an abstract idea. I know it hasn't been for me. It's something I aspire to every day. Liberation has always been connected to the conditions under which people actually live. Now, sometimes, what does that mean practically? That means when we ask questions like, can I earn enough to live? Can my children attend a school that is safe, well-resourced, and invested in their future? Can I get the health care I need? Can I live in a community where my family can thrive? Or can I rest and experience joy? And most important, can I imagine a future where I have resources and freedom to build the future that I desire? Those questions are at the heart of reproductive justice. Because reproductive justice is not just reduced to reproductive health care and abortion. Of course, those things matter. Of course, access to abortion care are essential. But the framework that those 12 Black women created 30 years ago was something much bigger. It asked whether people have the human right to have children and to have those children in safe and sustainable communities. And when we start there, we have to realize something that's also important when we ask those questions. One, that schools are absolutely tied to reproductive justice. So are jobs, so are wages, so are childcare, and so are housing and public infrastructure. We're going to get more into schools in just a second, but I just want to talk about the ability of communities to organize and build power is absolutely connected to reproductive justice. And so when we explore liberation today, we're going to do that from two directions. First, we're going to talk about the things that create liberation, so those conditions such as labor, schools, care, public institutions, and worker power. And then we'll switch to our Creators Corner with our Creators for Change Council member. And we're going to talk about the memory and the practice of liberation. What Black August teaches us is that we have a responsibility that's placed on us to remember not just happened what before, but what happens today. So I'll leave you to talk about that more in our narrative power note. But right now, let's get into it. I am so pleased. I can't just tell you, I have been waiting for this conversation all year. I am so pleased to welcome Stacy Davis Gates to Outspoken. Stacy is the president of Chicago Teachers Union. She's the executive vice president of the Illinois Federation of Teachers and vice president of the American Federation of Teachers. She is a longtime educator and a labor leader who has helped lead major campaigns for fully funding public schools, worker power, racial justice, and public school systems in Chicago, fighting today to get the systems that our families deserve. Stacy, welcome to Outspoken, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for the invitation to convene with you today. I'm looking forward to a really revolutionary conversation.
I am too. Okay, so let me just set this up. So, I'm excited about this conversation because I think sometimes when we talk about these issues, and particularly I talked about labor, we tend to put it over here. We put education over there. We put health and reproductive justice somewhere else. But our lives don't live that way. And so I want to start by bringing those together and just talk about it from your vantage point. When you hear reproductive justice and you hear about through a labor lens, what does that mean to you?
It means the respect of a woman's autonomy to have both agency, direction, support, and care of her person. That's what it means to me. The reproduction of humans requires a lot. It's not just gestation. It's not just delivery or postpartum. It is, quite frankly, the expanse of that young person's life that you are now charged with being guardian, to be honest with you. And so the care for my reproductive rights begin with me having agency and liberation as an individual. And they extend beyond the life of the child, because if I am expected to put forth life in this world, I should also expect to have a community of support.
I love that. I love how you started with agency and individual, but expanded out to the conditions. I want to talk a little bit more about those conditions. So when you think about wages, when you think about working conditions, healthcare, childcare, the public systems that shape those, that the types of, abilities for Black women and families to thrive, what comes to mind? How do those actually impact a Black woman's and her family's ability to thrive?
So full disclosure, I am a mother of three,
Okay.
and two bonus sons, very great young men. And
What are
I
the
will
age range?
tell you, yeah, I will tell you, to be perfectly honest, that my journey as a mother is what's put me most in touch with justice and injustice, equity and inequity. The way women are not prioritized in their own care, the way women's work is deprioritized, and the multidimensional spaces in which she is expected to engage and contribute to, it's not well thought out. I think a lot about the mothers. Just this week here in Chicago, school started, and there are women dropping off their children at schools that begin right at the same time they're supposed to punch into work, and they end while they're still on their shift. No one's thinking about how that is a crisis, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just an issue of how do we create an opportunity for mom to get to the school and back to work, or just after school. It is, why is that not a part of how we are encountering society? Can school really work without an understanding of the family schedule? Can the family really work without an understanding of the school schedule? The balkanization of our society contributes to the overuse of women as labor, both in the workplace, at home, and in the school community, quite frankly.
All right. So one thing I want to make sure you help us with is this third tenet of reproductive justice, which is the right to raise our children in safe and sustainable communities. We often focus on the first two, which is the right to have a child and not to have a child, but that third tenet is so important. How do you think schools fit into that vision?
Well, the union I run, the Chicago Teachers Union, thinks very highly of that. When we go to the bargaining table, we go to the bargaining table with the multidimensional needs of our members. Our members are over 80% female, right? And these women have to live in the city of Chicago. These women work in the city of Chicago, and they're raising families in the city of Chicago. So our fight for justice in the Chicago public schools extends beyond wages and benefits. In fact, it extends to after school care. It extends to before school care. It extends to making sure that our members have more access to IVF, that they have access to postpartum care, that they have access to mental health care, that they have access to time off. In our union, you get 12 weeks off when you have a child. And your partner also gets the same 12 weeks off if they are members of the workforce in the Chicago public schools. We think that that is justice. We think that a union that is intentionally anchored in young people, because if there's no young people, there's no need for a public school, that we also have to think about the places in which they come from. So we get a little loud when we have unhoused students. That's
Mm.
why it was important for us to bargain space to give those young people and their families the support that they need. So in our contract, we have people who help our unhoused students manage school, as well as putting them in line when it comes to subsidized and public housing in the city. We have to look at how do you help their mothers? How do you help their families participate in school? Well, it's kind of hard if you are unhoused to do that. So how does the union, how does the teacher, the paraprofessional, the clinician become a
Mhm.
partner in making it easier? Because when families are stable, when mothers know where they're living, where the food's coming from, and they have that sustainability, their young people come into our school communities prepared to learn. And they are most available for the type of coalition and partnership that makes schools work better. So you have to look at the person if you're going to educate the person. And that's our role as a union.
I think that's a great example of when we talk about why school is so much more, and it's not just about academics, and how the school is not just a building, it's really an institution for the community. With that, we also hear a lot of conversations around cost. I know you have a lot of conversations probably about budget. So, what's at stake when public institutions are treated as a budget problem instead of the community lifeline that you just so beautifully described?
Well, I think this is what we're always talking about when it comes to women and children in the society is number one, the deprioritization of their importance. Women bring forth life. And bringing forth that life, they're going to need the support of the community to nurture that life. And so we always talk about at our union, what will it take to support those lives? What will it take to support the communities and the neighborhoods that those lives are anchored in? And what we keep coming back with is that we have billionaires and millionaires in this country that are funding things that are anti-woman, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anti-reproductive rights. You have people
Mm-hmm.
who are funding the undemocratic nature of the leadership in this country right now. The removal of from public schools. How do you make the people who are experimenting in our society right now, the people who are running terrible experiments on public education and our young people, how do you make them more accountable for creating the support and the sustainability of those institutions? Because just like you said, it is not just the school community. It is a normalizing institution in
Mm-hmm.
our society. It is the place where young people first become citizens of the world, to be perfectly
Absolutely.
honest. And if
Yeah.
those schools are unavailable in walking distance in their neighborhood, it means that it puts an extra burden on those who are in the neighborhood still. We believe that schools should be fully resourced and fully funded. And by doing so, you're going to have to go to the place that is like funding bad politicians and bad
Mm-hmm.
politics. Those are
Mm-hmm.
billionaires. If Jeff
Yeah.
Bezos can put Katy Perry on the moon, then he can certainly pay a higher tax rate to ensure that his workforce is available for the type of work that provides a living wage to the families and the communities where our schools are anchored. We
Mm.
believe that we can connect the dots on this.
Yeah. That is so powerful, because I think underneath what you're saying is really this the truth, like a conversation about values, right? What are we willing
Yes.
to invest in? Who are we willing to invest in? And what do we believe communities deserve? So let's just kind of step back on that and really, this directly ties to like attacks on public education, and I think to broader attacks on communities, workers, and democracies. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think the attacks that we're experiencing from the right-wing administration in the White House, the attacks have experienced in a sustained space in a lot of our red states have to do with the attacks on women first. Like if you look at the attacks on reproductive rights, if you look at the attacks on public education, when you look at the attacks on SNAP benefits, on healthcare, they're all coming from the same place. right?
Right.
And
Mhm.
if we are serious about coalition building, we would make sure that we are talking about the needs of women, the reproductive rights as the anchor to the discussion. Women comprise a huge chunk of the workforce. Women comprise a huge chunk of the members of teachers' unions. Our
Mhm.
force, our power in coalition and in solidarity creates opportunities for other women in the workforce. I would submit that labor unions like ours, teachers unions whose membership are rooted and grounded in women's work, that we are the vanguard for this moment. We are the
Mm.
people who understand very clearly the balkanization of institutions, the ways in which justice shows up in policy, the funding that is removed when people don't like women having a voice, the
Mhm.
ideas that are promulgated by men who don't respect women. All of
Right.
these things have a source, and right now they're anchored in the Trump White House.
Yeah. I think that you're spot on, and I think this is brings us directly back to this conversation around Black August, because it asks us to remember generations of Black people who understood that freedom required organization, political education, discipline, resistance, and labor organizing is one of the places where we can see that collective power really becoming tangible. So this episode is really grounded in this notion and Black August and the work of liberation. How do you understand labor organizing as part of a larger Black freedom struggle?
Well, I understand it very clearly here in Chicago. The Chicago Teachers Union has been led by 4 very powerful Black women who have helped to recreate the terms under which we negotiate the public good here in Chicago. And the beneficiaries of that have been Black women.
Hmm.
We used to comprise the majority of workers in the Chicago public schools. Now that it's dwindled like it is at the federal government level, because of the power, the example, the professionalism, the leadership of Black women in the space of public education. What it does is that it gives hope, it gives opportunity, and it creates community. When you speak about Black August and it's it's and it's lifting up of Black voices. When you talk about organizing, I'm thinking about Ella Baker.
Oh,
When you speak
love
about the
her.
amplification of it, you're talking about Ida B. Wells. And when you're speaking about how we get it done and call truth to power, you're talking about a Fannie Lou Hamer. It is very clear to me that Black women have anchored for a
Mhm.
very long time this idea of leadership outside the lines, leadership for others in community because of who we care for,
Right.
who we have to care for, quite frankly. And we believe that is the grounding value principle of this union, is that our leadership as women has to create more for the community of young people we are charged with educating and caring for. And it has to create more from the families and the communities from which they come from, because they are with us and they're with their families and their communities. And so this morning, I'll give you an example. I was at a Far South Side school here in Chicago, and we were there with parents and young people, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds who are entering a pre-kindergarten space. And it was the most magical, pleasant, celebratory, and joyful time that I've had in a very long time. You
Mm.
get to see parents, young parents, invested, happy,
Mm.
expecting the school community to provide them with a particular type of partnership, and their presence there with their children also demonstrates their commitment to that type of partnership too. But you never hear about that. You never hear about, the Black fathers that were there this morning in
Mhm.
support of their young people, the Black mothers that were there, not just in support of their children, but everyone's children in that school community. It was beautiful, but that is a school community that our
Mm.
district would call under enrolled. That is a school community that is routinely underfunded by our governor and by our General Assembly. They are doing the work with another mother leading, a Black principal, a female principal, and creating a community that everyone in national media would tell you doesn't exist.
Hmm. That's interesting. So you said there were 3 Black women leading currently the labor movement there. Who are those women?
Well, Karen Lewis is probably one of the most iconic leaders of our union. Karen Lewis took this union from a place that absorbed the loss of Black female educators and built a fighting union grounded in racial, social, economic justice, and called truth to power, probably against one of the most powerful Democrats to ever run this city, Rahm Emanuel. She took a union on strike to make sure that kids had facilities that were cool in August, to make sure that young people could have a smaller class size. But she also led a union that, listened to Black children and their mothers when they said that there were cops in the school and they needed social workers in the school. And so Karen Lewis bargains for that. She creates space in our contract where we can hear the needs of mothers, attach them to the needs of educators, and create a pathway for young people to have an opportunity. And so these women built a union, not just for the workers and bread and butter issues of wages and benefits. Those are important, and we fight like hell for those. And she said it's big enough, it's generous enough to create that same opportunity for the women who send their children to the Chicago public schools.
Yeah, I love that. Really, because what you're showing is that there is something around Black women's leadership. But I think the through line for me is that in all those cases, even the principal in the school that you just mentioned, that it's never been about the individual. It's always been about this larger collective effort to make conditions better, which really is about solidarity. And we're in a moment where solidarity is very important. What do you think solidarity requires in this time?
Well, I'm going to raise you one on solidarity. I actually think that solidarity is the single most important thing in this moment. People can talk about pluralism, but I would like to talk about solidarity. This is a union that is multi-generational. This is a union that is multiracial. This is a union with many job classes embedded. They live on the south side, they live on the west side, the north side, the northwest side, the southwest side, the southeast side. Our members live all across this city. And somehow this union is able to unite under the guise of giving our young people more, right? Solidarity is what you do when someone else needs you. Solidarity is what you do when you have to make a way out of no way. Our public schools in this city have been unevenly funded and resourced for generations. And so our union has always been a place where educators could stand in the gap with both support and protection, right? And so what we are learning about solidarity here in Chicago is that you get to transform. Our imagination helped us win a school board with parents, with community partners, with community coalitions. So for the first time in the history of this city, in this upcoming November, we're expanding democracy. We will have more people to vote for. And this time they'll vote for the folks that will run the public schools in the city. We have a Chicago Public Schools graduate who is a father who said, you know what I want to do with my power? I want to make sure that we have early childhood education in our public schools. We want to make sure that we have aftercare in our public schools. We want to make schools a component, an institution that helps our families, not makes it harder for them.
Yeah. You know what? I just looked at the time. Where does the time go? But this is why I wanted people to hear you. You are doing amazing work there. I mean, Chicago is such a model on how we get things right. Before I let you go, I always end Outspoken with this one question, because I want people to take something away from Outspoken, something with them. So if people can take one thing from this conversation, what do you want them to hold on to?
Solidarity. I want them to hold on to the possibility of solidarity saving our lives. I want them to hold on to the possibility of solidarity being the thing that supports, protects, and gives us imagination and opportunity.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Before you go quickly, tell people where they can follow you and support your work.
Hey, Stacy Davis Gates. I am on every social media platform. Davis Gates 2019. Come see me. And if you don't want to see me, definitely come see my union, Chicago Teachers Union, CTU Local 1, and you can catch us on all platforms as well. Thank you so much for the opportunity to convene on this issue.
Thank you. And please come see Stacy and her union. I appreciate you joining me today. I especially appreciate you helping us make visible something that is so central to reproductive justice, that it's education is such a key point of that, but you spoke so much larger than that, things around liberation and how, it has to show up in our lives and in our schools and our workplaces and in our paychecks, labor, in the care we access. And so thank you so much, Stacy. Please come back. We'd love to have you come back.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, now let's move on to the next part of Outspoken. That conversation gave us a way to think about what I said, the conditions of liberation. But liberation also requires something else. It requires memory. We have to know what came before us. We have to understand the struggles that produced the freedoms that we have. And we have to ask what responsibility that history places of us living right now. That is what we're going to be exploring today in our Creators Corner. And I'm pleased to welcome Jamila Jones to help us think about Black August, not simply as a time to commemorate, but a memory, a practice, a political responsibility. Welcome to Outspoken.
Hey, cool kids. How are you? Can y'all hear me okay?
Oh, absolutely. So let's start by grounding everyone, because some people are watching this and they have heard of the term Black August. So some are aware of this, but some are completely new to this. For viewers who may have never heard about Black August, how do you explain it and why does it matter?
All right. Hey, cool kids. I understand fully that, number one, I'm a teacher at my heart, and that there are some people who may have never heard of Black August or hearing Black August, but have never had a definition before. It is a little bit different than, say, Juneteenth or Black History Month or any of our other more celebratory, commemorative occasions throughout the year. So I'm going to read something that I wrote to you real quick, because if you don't hear nothing else, you got to hear the definition so that we're on the same page, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Black August is a month of remembrance and action centered primarily and foremost around political prisoners and revolution. First started in 1979 by the Black guerrilla family to remember Brother Jonathan Jackson and Brother George Jackson, who were martyred, killed by the state in 1970 and 71. And I want to mention that I mean brother in this sense and brother in literally two brothers who grew up in the revolution together, were in the Black Panther Party, and were murdered within a year of each other by the state. Black August coincides with events in history that are key indicators of oppression and resistance, right? So in contemporary times, Michael Brown was murdered in August, right? You have, let's see, there are so many things. Michael Brown is murdered in August. Emmett Till is murdered in August. Nat Turner's Rebellion happens in August. On a more revolutionary side, like I said, Nat Turner's Rebellion happens in August. The Montgomery Brawl, aka Fade in the Water, aka Watch That Boy Swimming Across to Go Help His People, also happens in August. There's something in the water in August, and I feel like Black August is something that just, I don't know. The energy around the month of August. There's some of my revolutionary comrades actually treat Black August like their new year, as a way to kind of refresh and recommit to the struggle and the freedom struggle and the revolution. There are 4 principles of Black August: study, fast, train, and fight. And that fast, train, and fight are also quite literal. Those are not figurative terms, because the idea is if all forms of revolution should befall us right now, you have to be prepared. You have to be prepared. I would tell you that Black August is practical preparation for a liberated future.
March on Washington in August, like you said, a lot of things happen here, and I love what you're grounding us in. That it's important for us to reflect back on all the things that happened, but at the same time, like you said in the Fade in the Water, like our remembrance isn't passive. There are, I mean, tongue in cheek, there are practices attached to this. Formally they said things like, it's practices around memory, study, discipline, and resistance. When you think about those practices, what do you think they're asking of us right now?
Primarily to read. Primarily to read. We are in a culture that I happily contribute to, which is of content creation and bite-sized pieces of information. But that is never going to be enough to tell the whole story, never going to be enough for you to have the full context and for you to understand really the full weight of our history and what we're fighting for. The March on Washington is one of my Roman empires, for example. There's not a whole lot of bite-sized information pieces that will have you sit with the weight of the fact that there is not a stadium in this country that can hold 250,000 people. The amount of people that were gathered and organized on the Washington Mall that day, without Twitter, without Facebook, without cell phones, right? Without coordinated AC and fans, you know what I mean? This is something that it's important to use Black August to fully ground ourselves in the discipline of learning, the discipline of developing critical thinking, the discipline of developing a discipline, right? If revolution is a habit, revolution is a practice, freedom is a practice. These are things that we're going to have to shore ourselves up in, and Black August gives us an opportunity to do that.
Let's stay on this idea of practice and this word, because there's, I think, a danger when we have these things. It's something that we just honor once a year rather than something that changes how we live. And you talked about reading and studying. How should we understand Black August as more than a history lesson or annual commemoration?
Right. So it's really easy to take a moment, particularly in Black history or a particular day, and allow it to be there and nowhere else. But the thing about Black August is it calls us to create a practice of freedom work. I'm going to say that several times during this conversation, because I fully believe it. Freedom is a habit. Freedom is a practice, right?
What is your, because some people say, what does that mean? What is your practice? Just, what are some of, and it doesn't have to be one, what are some of the things you do to practice your liberation work?
On the practical side, I read 10 pages a day.
Okay.
I read 10 pages a day, and as many days as I can at the very least, because there was a time when it was illegal for me to read it all, for me to understand what the alphabet was.
That's right.
And for me to sit in the practice of doing something that was Black letter law illegal for my people until very recently. Once you develop that practice, you're also able to develop the ability to gather information, to take in information, to separate misinformation from disinformation, which, my goodness, is a more critical skill than ever before. That's just one of my critical practices. Meditation, yoga is another important practice of mine. And I know this is sounding very, drink water, take your meds, mind your business, but there are these are very practical things that can have you ready to address the consistent oppression and suppression of this world. I will get 7 hours of sleep every night. If I want to be functional for your revolution, my revolution, and just my ability to go through the day, right? I will snatch that sleep from the jaws of everyone who wants my labor and attention, because a habit of rest, a habit of recharge, understanding why your body needs that. 7 is a very specific number because for some reason, for 6 hours and 45 minutes, that's not enough. I'm
Mm.
at the point where my body will talk to me because of how I have been communicating with it in practice. I
Mm.
can wake up and understand that I've only gotten 6 hours and 50 minutes of sleep, and that's not going to be enough. You'll be surprised at what starts to talk to you when you communicate that you're open to habit and practice.
Mm. So your body will tell you when you have not got enough sleep.
Oh, yes. When I haven't drank, when I haven't had enough water,
Mm.
absolutely. It will make me stop and say, hey, Jamila, have we done our things? Have we
Mm.
done our practices? It will.
Mhm. So I hear you practice around reading. I hear practice around rest. One of the other things I want to talk about, which came up earlier, is this practice around care. Because sometimes when we talk about resistance, we always talk about it in terms of like fighting against something. But there's also care as part of this work, right? So people need to be sustained. People need to be protected, fed, taught. We need to create community, and those are all practices of liberations. Again, let's go back to Black August. When you think about that, um, that one of those notions is this idea of collective care. Do you think collective care is a political responsibility?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do you understand the level of collective care you have to be incarcerated and still start a commemorative event that happens every single year? That you and still
Wow.
have enough care for the people around you, still have enough care for the people that are living outside of the prison that you are in, that you are trapped in, and understanding that there is still a need that needs to be filled, and then having the wherewithal to fill it. How can community care not be a political act? Also, it's for me, it's like voting. If it didn't matter, they wouldn't try to tell us we shouldn't be doing it.
That's
Right?
true.
They wouldn't.
Right.
Yeah,
And making it even harder now,
making it even harder now. We live in such an isolationist society.
right.
There's a push to be antisocial. There's a
Mhm.
push to not care about people. There is a push to be very individualistic, and as long as you see a benefit in this thing in the short term, um, then that's enough to keep it.
Mm.
But it's not. It's not. And community care for you because you are part of the community, right? Like my therapist said, hey, when you say you care about people, did you know you're a people? You're a people, right?
Mm.
So there's a political act,
I love
and
that. You're a people too. Yeah.
you're a people too. You're a people too.
Mm.
Yeah,
I,
your
I- you
best
know, yeah.
somebody.
I'm sorry. Mhm.
If your best friend had a significant other who was treating them the way you treat yourself, what would you tell them to do?
Right.
One more time, if your best friend had a significant other that treated them the way you treat yourself, what would you tell them to do?
Yeah. I think that's really hard for some people sometimes to really take a step back and, think about, why would I allow, even let's stay with that, right? Why would I allow something to happen to me or me to be treated in a certain way when I would tell everyone I love not to do that? And so particularly for Black women, right? There's something about us that, we are, I think, socialized to believe we must endure, tolerate, withstand, and at the same time save the world, right?
Right, right.
No.
The conversation about reproductive justice, for me, that's how it ties in. Because
Hmm.
what is reproductive justice but autonomy, the human right to have autonomy over your own body? And
Hmm.
for Black women, that starts when we are Black girls.
Yeah.
We are raised with a mindset that your sleep, your labor, your emotional capacity at any time belongs to someone else. And not only does it belong to someone else, it's actually better over there. Like it's better for me to expend my energy on other people except me. We are only 3 quick right turns between there, and you legally do not have autonomy over your body.
Hmm.
I think it's important for us to
Hmm.
make those connections to literally the act of caring for ourselves, to understanding that part of that means you should have autonomy over what happens to you and what happens to your own body. And it is okay to snatch it back from the hands of capitalism, misogyny, government, anyone who decides that they know more about your body than you do.
Mhm. Yeah, and even, I mean, let's talk about this in the context of the, over 90% that said, we're going to take a rest, right? And, we know what that means. That just means, we're going to show up. We always do. We always answer the call. But, you know, we Black women have created humanity, right? When you trace us all the way back to Africa. And so, but in all the cases, our labor, all of the things, our contributions have been sort of placed over here and not sitting with us. But at the same time, we are still asked to show up. We're still asked to, as you said, not place ourselves first, but still carry humanity on our backs, still, come up with the solutions, still the canary in the coal mine, all of those things. And so, I think it's just really important right now because, we are living in this moment where so many communities and so many Black women are being asked to withstand with fewer resources. We are being pushed out of jobs. There is an effort to literally clip our wings.
Right.
And so, how would you? Yes, yes. How would you connect the conditions of all of that, to Black August and what we're facing today?
So for me, Black August is about recognizing the freedom struggle. And part of recognizing the freedom struggle is understanding all of the ways that these systems are oppressive and suppressive. And and again, this just comes from years of reading 10 pages a day, right? Being able to have a clear analysis about what is happening and why.
Right. Yeah.
For me, that's a big part of it. That's a big part of what connects Black August to come on, Wi-Fi, don't fail me now. That connects
We hear you loud and clear. We hear you.
That connects Black August to the work that we should all be doing, right? Because again, it's about the practice and habit of the freedom struggle and understanding the multitude of ways that this system takes a toll on your body, on your mind, on your spirit, on your community, and your ability to do the critical work that we need, inner and outer. Black August is something that helps us connect all of those things and gives us a discipline to center back to the ultimate goal, which is freedom and liberation.
Yeah. Okay. So I think everybody's understanding, they may be saying, okay, I understand history. I understand the responsibility. And so I want to end with this last question, which is, Black August is coming to an end. But of course, the work is not coming to an end. So what do you want people to carry with them after this month ends?
I want people to carry with them the knowledge that this is possible, right? The knowledge that this is possible. Because it's only things like freedom, reproductive justice, liberation. These are things that other people already have. And this is what I need people to understand, right? Men, they already have bodily autonomy. They already have that. And why would someone tell you that you should not have what they feel like they're entitled to naturally? And the knowledge of the fact that this is possible, however you grab that knowledge. If tonight is the first night you get the 8 and 9 hours of sleep that you need, I need you to understand that this is possible, that revolution is possible. And I love what Sister was talking about earlier about imagination, understanding that imagination is a practice. And imagination is really just knowledge that's early. It's knowledge.
Imagination is the greatest nation.
It is, isn't it? It is. It
Yeah.
is. So that's what I want people to grasp from this. I want people to grasp the knowledge that revolution is possible, and that liberation is possible, and the freedom struggle is a struggle that's possible to win. But freedom struggle requires a struggle, and Black August is something that allows us to commemorate that.
All right, Jamila, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for helping us understand that Black August is not simply something to commemorate, but also asking us to do something. So as you said, believe things are possible. Study, that requires discipline, requires to practice, uh, resistance, care, responsibility. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being a part of our Creators for Change Council. Tell people who do not know about you where they can follow you.
Thank y'all so much. I understand that my camera is down, but can you still hear me?
Yes, we can absolutely hear you.
I can work with that. I am Sunny Day Jones everywhere that I would like to be found online. Everywhere. I can't promise you get a response on Twitter because my account is still up just for the sake of just for the love of the game. But that's not a place for me anymore.
Okay. Where are you primarily? Where do you live primarily online?
Primarily, I live on Instagram, on Blue Sky, on TikTok, and on Threads.
All right, Blue Sky. All right, you still hanging in with Blue Sky. All right.
I still am. It's a nice, cozy place of the internet.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jamila. Keep doing the great work that you do. Keep shining a light on all these issues. Keep creating that incredible content that helps us learn. And that brings me now to today's narrative power note. Now, we've spent this episode talking about liberation in two different ways. First, with Stacy Davis Gates, who talked about it in terms of the material conditions. That's things like schools, work, wages, care, public institutions, community infrastructure, collective power. And most recently with Jamila, who talked about practices, those practices that sustain liberation. So studying, rest, care, discipline, resistance, political responsibility. But there's another layer underneath this conversation, and that, of course, is narrative. Because before we decide what we're willing to build or fund or protect or change as a society, we make judgments about what and who is worthy of an investment. Think about it. When a school doesn't have what children need, what story do we tell? We just heard Stacy Gates talk about that, right? It's an under-resourced school that was thriving. Okay, do we tell a story about children and family who somehow failed, or we talk about the systems that failed to provide? When a mother is struggling to balance work or childcare, healthcare, or the needs of her family, do we tell a story about an individual woman who somehow needs to work harder? Or do we ask why we've constructed systems that require so much of her while providing so little support? Those aren't simply different languages. Those stories help determine what solutions we believe are necessary and even what solutions we believe are possible. And on that note, I have to, also name that we lost someone who believed in that deeply just a few hours ago. Dolly Parton, who grew up, she came from a large family. I believe it was 12 children, grew up in poverty, and always believed that people deserved more and worked her entire life to do that. She also suffered from endometriosis and was not able to enjoy that third tenet of reproductive justice, which is the right to raise your children in safe and sustainable environments. But she did a lot to make sure that people understand this issue and so that we can have our reproductive autonomy. And so that's what I've been thinking so much about today when I'm thinking about narrative demand, our concept that we released after some rigorous research in April. And that's the gap between the stories that Black women are routinely given and the stories that Black women say we actually want and need, so that people not just see our humanity, but stand behind us and help us fight for it. And so what we're hearing is important. Black women aren't simply asking for this. We're asking for a different narrative environment, one where Black women can experience care and receive care, where we can experience peace, where the structural conditions surrounding our lives are visible, and where our full humanity doesn't have to be earned through suffering, exceptionalism, or endless resilience. That's the narrative question, but it's also a power question. That helps shape what people believe, what people believe it should be legitimate, what people believe demands action, what people believe deserve investment, what people believe deserves protection. And that is why narrative power matters to reproductive justice. And that is why we want to continue to fight for it. As we close, I want to return to where we started. Black August asks us to remember, but remembrance without responsibility simply isn't enough. The people whose struggles we honor weren't fighting for future generations so they could just remember their names. They were fighting to change the conditions under which Black people lived. And what that includes and what that work involves, it involves that we continue to do this work. Reproductive justice gives us that framework so that we can do that work, so that people can make decisions about their bodies and their futures. They can raise their children in those safe and sustainable environments, and they can access all the things we talked about. Black August reminds us that none of us are here simply by ourselves. We are here because people organized for us, people studied, people built institutions, they resisted, they cared for one another, and they told the stories about what freedom looks like because they believed in possibility. And so those are the practices I encourage you to carry into throughout the end of this August and beyond. Study, remember, organize, care, questions, talk about the stories that we have inherited, and keep asking, what would liberation require of us now? I want to thank the Chicago Teachers Union President Stacy Davis Gates for joining us today. And thank you, Sunny Day or Jamila Jones, for joining us on the Creators Corner and helping us think more deeply about the meaning and responsibility of Black August. And as always, thank you for joining Outspoken. So stay informed, stay engaged, and most important, until next time, stay outspoken.